So in today's video, I want to talk about this idea that I've kind of formulated, and I'm not the first person probably who has come up with this, but that there is no such thing as technology, that it is all magic. Now that sounds kind of crazy on its surface, but I want to dive into it a little bit and kind of hopefully explain a few of my thought processes in regards to this. Um, a pithy way of kind of my idea of the way that I think about it is that we have outsourced sorcery. That we these things that we think of, AI, cell phones, internet, all of this is not actually technology that we're developing. It is magic that we are uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Democratizing, popularizing, just finding kind of better ways to do it. And there's an expression, it's been used in some movies. Thor, the first Thor movie uh, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Thor says it, but it's a phrase that's, uh, there's a bunch of people who kind of talk about where it started, but the idea is this, that any sufficiently advanced technology would appear like magic to a primitive people. And that's kind of been used, tossed around a lot. I actually think it's the inverse. I think that technology is what arrogant, ignorant, or people who are afraid of the supernatural, I think that's what they call magic. And to give evidence for this a little bit, is everything that we use technology for are things that magicians used to do, that sorcerers used to do, that witches used to do. The internet is just a crystal ball. They would use crystal balls and commune with the spirits and all those things, and they would get knowledge from nothing. That from the air, from the ether, this crystal ball and these spells would pull knowledge into it, and it would be revealed to the person with the ball. The cell phone, with especially video cameras and things like that, are scrying pools. Sorcerers and wizards would used to have a pool with spells inscribed in it and water on the surface, and they could communicate across great distances. At least these are the stories, right? And they would do that. You had mirrors, magic mirrors, that were filled with gems and precious metals and all kinds of designs of spells. If you were to smash open a so-called magic mirror that allowed instant communication or the ability to spy on someone over a great distance, like we do with video cameras, if you were to smash those open, you would find crystals and precious metal and a bunch of weird little designs that the normal person would have no concept of what those are. And if you smash open a computer or a cell phone, you see the same thing. You see precious metals, you see types of crystal, you see uh, weird patterns and designs. You get a Raspberry Pi, that's what it looks like. They all kind of look like that, and we think that we're discovering these new technologies. I think that we're just rediscovering magic and finding a more efficient way to do it. That everything that wizards or sorcerers or witches or all these people used to do, now everyday people are doing every day. Even things, you get into things like the word sorcery is also kind of a source of pharmakia, where we get pharmacies and medicine. Uh, so, witches used to make brews and poultices, and now we have doctors who do the same. We've traded druids with white robes for scientists with white lab coats. We've traded spell books for code books. We've traded these old magics for this new technology, but it's all the same. It does the same thing. It just, now we're doing it at scale. This is why I use the expression, we've outsourced sorcery. We've democratized this idea of magic. What used to be reserved to the magicians that would work for kings, now everybody can do. Even you get to the extreme things, fireballs, and we have missiles. That all of these things, they're so similar to the things that you hear about back then. And this goes beyond that as well. And I think it's people are just afraid of the supernatural. They're afraid of acknowledging that these things could even remotely be similar. That people will hear stories about, Merlin and ancient wizards and these things, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's just a silly story." And these same people will say things like unicorns never existed. I had a friend that I had an argument with once about whether unicorns had ever been real. The Bible talks about unicorns. A lot of people, they'll hear that and they'll be like, what are you talking about? Those are fantastical beasts. They never existed. And it's because in their mind, what they're picturing is a white horse with a single horn that shoots rainbows out of its eyes and sparkles out of its ass. That's what they're imagining. That blood can heal somebody from the point of death, and that the unicorn tears can cure disease. That's what they're imagining. They're not imagining just a horse with a horn that was valuable that got hunted to extinction, which is most likely what it was. And you see this, that if you can mythologize something, especially if it's something that is extinct, people will refuse to believe it ever could have existed. But we know that this is not the case because ravens exist, and they are in every mythology out there. Native American, Norse mythology, Egyptian mythology. Ravens are ubiquitous in mythology, messengers of the gods. All these, and ravens can communicate. They're like parrots. They can actually mimic speech. Like, there is so much mythology around ravens and the things that they did. But because we see ravens in everyday life, no one says, well, they never existed. Birds that can talk, what? But it's because we know there are birds that can talk, parrots and ravens and others as well, that can mimic speech and mimic it sometimes almost communicatively, almost as if they're having conversations. They're not specifically, it's a response thing, but these birds that are able to do that we know exist, but they also are in mythology. But then you have something like a unicorn, which is extinct now, only exists in mythology, and so people will look at you like you're insane if you say that you believe they ever existed. It's the same thing with dragons. Dragons, if you say that you believed in dragons, people will look at you like you're insane, despite the fact that in China they had a role of dragon keeper, despite the fact that Marco Polo talked about seeing dragons, despite the fact that fundamentally there is nothing biologically that prevents these creatures from existing, even fire-breathing ones. There are creatures that we know about that produce internal combustion, that fireflies. I live in Texas. We have fireflies every year. Every year, these bugs that glow, that their butts glow. You have bombardier beetles that produce flames. And again, and this is if you even take the idea of kind of seriously and you take it at surface value, at face value, that it is this mythological thing with all of these other things. So, for example, the stories of fire-breathing dragons. Well, we know that there are reptiles that can spit basically acid, that can spit acid at people and it can burn. So if you were hit by that, you'd say, it's just like fire. This just dragon just breathed fire on me, even if it was small, even if it wasn't literal, like napalm level fire. So it's this mixing of mythologizing in order to prevent people from believing in something that otherwise there's no reason for that it cannot exist. So for example, people talk about the Salem witch trials, and they say that how terrible it is that these women were killed and accused of being witches just because people hated women or something along those, whatever the reason that they give for why they think the Salem witch trials happened. And one of my responses is always, what if they were real witches? What if they were real? What if they were trying to commune with demons? What if they were trying to engage in witchcraft? Everyone just assumes that because that they're looking at it backwards and they inherently want to believe that these women were innocent, that they say, well, there's no way they were doing witchcraft, partly because, again, they refuse to believe that it's even possible. So that's the first thing. They refuse to believe that witchcraft is possible. And this is something that I've gotten into before with several people. I've had arguments about this, is that it doesn't matter whether you believe it's possible. Does that other person believe it's possible? Because I've gotten into this with people who argue with me about Satanism. It doesn't matter whether you believe that Satan is real. If there's a Satanist who believes Satan is real and they want to sacrifice something to Satan because they believe he's real, believe them, that they believe it, and respond accordingly. This goes into my video about Islam. Like, if you take people seriously, if they believe something, believe that they believe it. But because you don't believe something, you refuse to believe that it's real at all, and thus you refuse to believe that anyone else could possibly believe it. And so going back to the Salem witch trials, first off, it gets overblown. It wasn't like this huge thing where like thousands of women were killed, or even dozens, because they were accused of being witches. It's kind of like the witch hunts of the Inquisition. Um, actually more proto-Protestants and later actual Protestants were killed by the Inquisition than anyone who was accused of being a witch were killed. But Hollywood likes to kind of popularize things, and people get more history from a Hollywood movie. They get more of what they believe about Christianity, for example, from Hollywood movies than they do from actual reality. So because they saw a movie once where this evil inquisitor was burning a witch, they're like, oh, that must have been what the Inquisition was all about. And I'm no Catholic apologist, but it was not. That is not what the Inquisition was about. It was actually more about stamping out Protestantism than it was about hunting witches or anything like that. It was far more political as well. Primarily, especially the Spanish Inquisition was about stopping the Protestants, but also about the crown and the church kind of working together in Spain against Muslims, for example, who were continually trying to come back into the region. There was a lot of history of Spain is about Muslims coming up from Africa, being fought back up this kind of back and forth of Reconquista and conquistas and conquests of the Iberian Peninsula. But so people have these views about history, again, that are informed far more by Hollywood than they are by scripture or by history books or by any of these things, depending on what you want to look at. More people, philosophy, for example, people don't understand philosophy. They will they'll see a movie that talks about Nietzsche or Aristotle or Plato. They may have seen a movie where those people were mentioned, but they don't actually know anything about them. They see a movie that depicts the Crusaders as these evil people who went into the Holy Land and slaughtered all the Muslims, and that's not the case. That the Crusades were much more nuanced than that, especially the first and second and third Crusade. Um, were not this aggressive force of crusaders coming in and conquering. It was a reconquest. It was retaking land that had been taken from them. The Muslims came in first, conquered the Holy Land, and then they were slaughtering Christians and Jews and pilgrims and all these things. And the Crusaders were called upon by the Eastern Orthodox Church to try to help them, and they came in response to that. And there was a lot of back and forth, and there's a lot of stuff about the Catholics and not the Protestants, they weren't around yet, the Catholics and the Orthodox, and kind of their coming to loggerheads and conflicts and things along those lines, but also them working together on occasion to defend the region. So there's a lot of nuance to the Crusades, and this video is not necessarily about that, but it is about this idea of again, as I started with, this outsourcing of sorcery. And so I kind of want to make sure that I stay on that a little bit more. I've kind of gone a little off the rails there, a little bit about uh, things, but this idea that something gets mythologized and then people refuse to believe it, even if there is a equivalent to it. So again, back to the unicorns. The idea that the idea of a unicorn is farcical is crazy to me, because a creature such as the narwhal exists. This is a whale with a horn. There are so many creatures that have horns or antlers that the idea that there was a horse that once existed, maybe possibly primarily in Europe, that was a horse with a horn that was valuable and got hunted to extinction. The Why that is so farcical to people, I just don't understand, except to say that they are just willfully ignorant or arrogant or just afraid of anything that they have deemed mythological being possible. And you see this even with some people who are deists or who will say they believe in a god, pagans, anyone. If you have any concept of a god, then the supernatural is entirely rational and reasonable. But even if you don't, the idea that you don't even need that for a lot of these things. So it it might be the other way around, right? So I'm saying that technology is magic, but it is theoretically possible as well that the magicians were just technology. It was just proto technology, that they found these ways to inscribe metal in a way that would carry information. That's literally what our computers do. It is metal with certain types of metal, certain things inscribed on it or in it, and they do what we want them to do. They bring up information or they allow communication. These types of things, if we can do it with our technology, with our knowledge, then there's no reason it couldn't have gone backwards in some other way. Now, I think that that's a little bit more of a stretch than the way that I'm thinking about it, where that was just magic. You had some people who could do it, some people who couldn't. And now we're at a point where there's just so much more people, there's so much more proliferation of knowledge and all of these things that we've, again, outsourced sorcery. This does come to a question of, let's say that that's the case, then if you are a Christian, if you are someone who believes in God, if you're someone who's heard that magic is bad, should you not use cell phones? Should you not use the internet? And the answer to that is you can use it. And here's why. Because it's not the thing itself that is a problem. And this is something that I want to make sure that I'm very clear on, because yeah, this is kind of just a little bit rambly, but the idea that what is the difference between magic and miracles? So if you have someone who is a Christian and they're a faith healer, and you have someone who comes to them with a cut on their arm, and the Christian faith healer touches it and heals them, you would say that that's a good thing. Let's say that but if you have someone with a cut on their arm and they go to a witch and she makes a paste and she puts it on there and it heals it, they're healed. So the outcome is the same, but what was the source? Where did it come from and who was doing it? So if you believe in a divine God who is the source of all of miracles and all of that, then it's who's doing it and why. Because miracles and magic, the only difference is who's doing it and why. Where is it coming from? The witch goes and consorts with the demons, and then she can make a poultice and she can heal someone's cut. The faith healer, he prays to God, he can put his hands on someone, he can heal their cut. The pharmacist, he goes to school and he learns about these chemicals that if you mix them together, you put them on an arm and you heal a cut. Right? I have triple antibiotic ointment in my cabinet. I can go get that. It's a paste. Put it on my arm if it's cut. It helps the cut heal, helps me not get infected, saves my life. Right? The faith healer does the same. The witch does the same. Who's doing it and why? Because I also believe that medicine is primarily just a continuation of this type of thing as well. It's this sorcery. It's this magic. It's this thing that it used to be more difficult to do, but it has become easier to do through certain materials or through the proliferation of communication and the ability for people to talk these things out and kind of experiment with these spells. And if you look into history, if you look into wizards and witches and all of those things, they experimented with spells. They experimented with the ways to do things. And but if you had if you had a druid in Ireland who was doing magic, he couldn't communicate with a wizard in the Ottoman Empire who was doing magic for the Sultan. But now we can. And even back then, if you take what I'm talking about as possible, were ways that they actually were communicating. Even potentially back then through, again, scrying pools or crystal balls or all of these things. And you have these spiritists and you have all of these people, psychics and all these things. And yes, most of them are charlatans, all of that. But people today, they are so afraid of even the possibility of the supernatural that they would deny it even if it happened in their face. And you see this sometimes where you will see someone who believes in God, maybe even a deist, again, not even necessarily a Christian, arguing with an atheist, and they'll maybe ask, what would it take for you to believe? And the atheist will say something like, if I saw a vision, written in the sky, or if I had a dream, or if an angel appeared before me, they'll give these kinds of things. But that's not the case. And a few of them, I think it was Christopher Hitchens, who kind of said that one time. He said, well, if I came out and there was, written across the sky was, God is real and Jesus Christ is his son, and it was written in the stars or something along those lines. And then the person he was talking to was, you wouldn't think that you were just being delusional, that you were just having a vision, or if an angel appeared before me, I'd believe. And it's like, no, you would just think that you were delusional, because you suppress the truth and unrighteousness. You don't want there to be a God, because that interrupts with you being your own God. And so in the same way with this, we are not as smart as we believe we are. We haven't discovered these new technologies that just make us better than every person who came before us. We're just doing the same things that have always been done. We're just able to do it at scale. We're just able to do it democratized individually, that now I don't have to go to a court sorcerer and pay an exorbitant amount of gold to uh, have a message sent supernaturally. I can do it with my own phone. We can do these things, and we actually do pay quite a bit for these technologies, that they're not cheap. Right? Just the same way that this is one of the things that's interesting, that the average person in America, the average person in the West, lives like a king did historically. And historically, kings could afford sorcerers and wizards. Why? Because they could afford the materials for it. They could afford the precious metals and the gems and the stones and all of these things that the sorcerers and these witches needed to do this magic. But now, we, the average person in America, that's maybe as poor as you think you are, you probably live better than most kings historically. So is it any wonder then that you have access to things like scrying pools and crystal balls and all the things that these kings used to have? And again, I'm using those terms, which might put people off if you even get this far in the video. But again, it's who's using it and why. So I do think that Christians should continue to use cell phones and the internet and all these things, because the source is the same. It's what are you doing with this divine magic? Because all magic, all miracles, all of these things that can disrupt the natural order all come from the same source, and that's God. The fallen angels were once angels, and they're the ones who allow the witches and all those to do their magic. The Bible talks about not doing magic. And the question is, well, how are people able to do it in the first place? And it's because it's from the same source that gives the faithful their ability to do miracles. Miracles, magic, again, same thing, just who's doing it and why. Because you can get the same effects from it. So very clearly it is the same thing that you're doing, but it's how you're doing it and why you're doing it, what you're doing it for, what your goals are. So if your goal with the internet is just to communicate, plan a Bible study, study the Bible, learn more about God, awesome, keep doing that. If your goal with the internet is to watch pornography or hook up with people, willy-nilly, or to push some, evil agenda, then don't do that. Don't do that. That's wrong. That's bad. So you're using it wrong. You're using it for bad reasons. And so just that it's just funny to me, because this is something that I think about a lot, just the idea that we aren't any smarter. I talked about this in other videos. We aren't any smarter than people who came before us. We just have more access to information. We have more access to things. And in fact, most people nowadays are dumber than they've ever been in history. I talked about in a previous video that something like 60% of adults can't read above a third grade level. And so we have people who are more disconnected, who are just less intelligent than ever before. And yet we look back on history and we say, how could those fools have believed what they believed? And it's, how can you believe what you believe? Why do you believe what you believe? Why is it that a lot of people watching this are probably going to think, oh, that's crazy. It's technology. We're just smarter now. We just figured these things out. We figured out how to literally store information in the air and then pull it into a device that we hold in our hand, like a magic mirror. That we think we're the first ones who could have ever figured these things out. We're the first ones who could have ever figured out how to transmit information across vast distances. We're the first ones who ever could have figured out how to store information in a mechanical device. And I don't think we are. I don't think we're the first ones who could have ever discovered this. I just think that, again, we've outsourced it. We've democratized it. We've done it at scale. And that's the only difference. That I firmly believe that this is all magic, that none of it is technology, that all of it comes from the same source. It is either demons inspiring people, or angels inspiring people, or people just discovering that the natural world is much deeper than we think it is, and that some of the things we think are supernatural or miraculous or magical are more formularized than that. And this is what you see in the old stories. I brought it up before. You trade the druid or the wizard in the white robes for the scientist in the white lab coat. You trade the spell book for the C++ code book. But it's all gobbledygook when you look at it. It's all just a bunch of symbols and things that you put in a certain order and a certain thing happens that you use to transmit or store information. Your computer, your phone literally has crystals in it, literally has precious metals in it that are the reason it works. The same way that the wizard would store information on a magic mirror or a scrying pool or a crystal ball. And so a little bit kind of maybe a silly video in a lot of ways, because it's like, what do you do with this? But it's just something that I think about frequently, is just the way that we think about the world, and the way that we think about the world, how it actually works, and how so much of what we believe is not from reading history, is not from truly understanding things, isn't from researching things or learning about things. They're kind of in maybe with this little bit of a story. So I was talking my sister once a long time ago. She might not even remember this, so if she watches this and she's like, "I don't remember that conversation," I do. I remember it. But back when we were like really young, so we're talking 30 years ago or so now, probably, we were talking about faith and Christianity, because that's something that I've talked about my entire life with people, even before I was really into being Christian and all these things. So this is, again, 20, 30 years ago, probably. We were talking about heaven. And I remember her saying that she was, not that she didn't want to go to heaven, but that she was just felt like it was going to be boring to be in heaven sitting on a cloud playing a harp all the time, which was a kind of tacit admission that her understanding of heaven in that moment was more from something like Looney Tunes than it was from the actual scriptures. And this is a lot of people that they get their information. A lot of people, for example, hell is a really big one too, that people think that hell is a bunch of demons poking people with pitchforks from things like Looney Tunes. Again, they think that demons have horns and tails and red skin, and that that's what demons look like. They think that hell is a pit of fire and pain and suffering, and they're going to be tortured by demons, and that is not the way the Bible describes hell at all. In fact, depending on some things that you read in the scripture, is there even necessarily a thing that is hell that is anything like what we popularized it as through things like Hollywood and some religious texts and things like that? Or is it's just separation from God? It's just the place that everyone else goes who doesn't go to heaven, and it's not even like anything like what we think it is. And so there's so many things like that, whether it's history, whether it's religion, whether it's philosophy, whether it's whatever, name a subject, even things like math. Like, people don't understand the nuances and the things that we learn from mathematics and physics and all of these things. It just blows my mind. And so when I say that we've outsourced sorcery, when I say that I believe that technology doesn't exist, that it's magic, what I'm really saying is that there's more to reality than you probably are willing to admit. There's more to history, there is more to life, there is more to the natural world, let alone the supernatural world, than you're willing to admit. You dismiss things not because they're irrational or unreasonable. You dismiss things because you want to. You dismiss things because you're afraid, or you're just ignorant, or you're arrogant. And that is so many people. They are so arrogant within their ignorance, and it makes them angry. There's an expression that I have that the three things you need to be an atheist or a leftist are: you have to be arrogant, ignorant, and angry. And if any of those three are missing, you're not going to be an atheist. You might be agnostic, you might be a deist, you might not embrace Christianity, you might become something else, but you're not going to be an atheist unless you're those three things: arrogance, ignorance, and anger. It's the same thing with being a leftist, that you won't be a leftist unless you have those three things. You might be center left, you might be libertarian, you could even be an anarchist, but to be like a communist, leftist, Marxist, you have to be angry, you have to be ignorant, and you have to be arrogant. Those are the three things. And I just want people to stop being those things. At least stop being ignorant if you can. If you can't, then stop being angry. Please just stop being angry. And if you can't stop that, stop being arrogant. Stop one of them at least, because those are the things that will stop you from really learning, from really exploring reality, from listening to other people and learning from them. Is if you could stop those three things. And so that's kind of what I ultimately want this video to be about, is kind of a shock to the system. When I say I don't believe that technology is real, I think it's magic, is that I want people to get thinking about things in different ways. Like, why is it that when you hear that, your gut reaction is, that's dumb, what are you talking about? Of course technology is real and magic's fake. There's no such thing as magic. Why do you believe that? Why do you believe that unicorns never existed, like my buddy did back in the day? Why is it that you believe that there were no witches at the Salem witch trials? There was no such thing as witches when the Inquisition was hunting witches. Which, again, even your view of those things is false. But even if your view of them was correct, why do you think that those couldn't have been possible to have existed? Why is it that you think that dragons never existed? Why is it that you think that ghosts can't exist? And I'm someone who doesn't believe that ghosts exist for lots of reasons. I'm not going to get into that in this video. But if you hear that and you think just immediately it's impossible, why is it that you think it's impossible? And I want you to actually kind of look into that. I want you to think about the things that I brought up, like why is it that everything we use technology for is what they used to use magic for? And we just take it for granted that we're not doing the same thing that those magicians were doing because you think what they did was impossible. But what we do is real, even though we're doing the exact same thing with the exact same materials that they used back then. We're just, again, doing it at scale. We've outsourced it, we've democratized it. And so many things like that, just the things that we take for granted that I want people to start looking into. And so that's kind of what this video is about, is really kind of diving into something interesting that I think is interesting, and looking at it that, that, like, for example, I think a lot of the technology, the reason that we have it is because demons are seeding it so that we will become lazy and more easily manipulated through things like propaganda. That's one of the reasons that I think that technology has kind of taken off, is because the enemy has seen it as a tool that once people started to accept it, he was able to popularize it and to spread it a little bit more quickly. But that's a whole. I don't know if that's a whole other video. I don't think I would need to make a video about that necessarily, because I think it fits in here pretty well. That's kind of why I think it got started. And again, but I think that it can be turned for good, right? We can turn the things of the enemy against him. So you don't need to, let's say that you're a Christian and you watch this and you think, oh my gosh, my cell phone's magic, I don't want to use my cell phone. Then call your cell phone a miracle, then, because that's what it is. Cell phones are miracles. So they are either miracles, magic. Again, the only difference is, what are you using it for? What are you using it for? Why are you doing it? How are you doing it? What are you using it for? But I kind of want to wrap it up there. Just don't take things for granted, whether existing, non-existing, real, not real, what you believe, what you think about history. Don't take it for granted. And I want this channel to be a channel that helps people stop taking certain things for granted. Like the video about stop saying I have a relationship and not a religion. That's a phrase that people take for granted. Stop taking it for granted. People take how the church is supposed to operate. That's my whole video about eldership is about that. Don't take it for granted. Look into it yourself. Be educated yourself as much as you can be. But most importantly, don't become arrogant. Don't be arrogant in your ignorance, especially. If there's something that you don't know about and you start hearing about it, either look into it yourself, or don't be arrogant about it at least. It's like the person who goes into the auto body shop who knows nothing about cars, but they're an arrogant person and they're an angry person and they're ignorant about cars, and so they have an argument with the person in the auto shop about their vehicle, and that person's just sitting there like, you just don't know what you're talking about. I'm trying to help you and explain this to you. But you see that all the time. You see people ignorant about a topic, but incredibly arrogant about it. You see this all the time on the internet. People who don't know anything, but maybe heard one thing in like a TikTok video or read something on Wikipedia, and they're entirely ignorant about the topic, but they just are arrogant in their ignorance. That's something that I try never to do, to be arrogant about things, especially things I don't know about, but even things I do know about. I try to avoid being arrogant about those when I talk about them. So just ending there, don't be ignorant, arrogant, and angry. Otherwise, you'll become a leftist atheist, and then no one will like you or want to be around you. Uh, Also, don't take things for granted, and just, look into things, learn about things, have crazy ideas and talk them out and think about them, like this video kind of is. The idea that magic is, the technology is not real, it's really just magic. It's a crazy idea, but something worth talking about, worth thinking about. If you like the video, please like, share, subscribe, all of those things. If you want to talk, do so in the comment section. Please do so respectfully. And just, if you have thoughts about this, if you disagree, agree, all those things, I'd love to hear from you about it. A little bit more kind of a silly in some ways, but also very serious in others, because while I don't think technology is real, I think magic part is a little tongue in cheek, a little silly, because I do think, I do believe that, but it's not something that's like, I'm willing to like die on this hill about believing that or anything. But if you have thoughts about it, or you want to talk about it, you're like, oh man, that's crazy, I've never thought about it, but it actually does kind of make a certain sort of sense, share that down below. But if you're like, that's just entirely insane, whatever, you say that too. Just whatever you say, remember, please be respectful. But I'm going to end the video there, and just, guys, don't be arrogant, ignorant, or angry. Video went kind of all over the place, but I hope you enjoyed it. All right, I'll see you in the next one.